This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. We've got a great show for you. A ton of news, tons of notes going on. WWE making waves. Their third quarter earnings conference was just around the corner, so you know what that means? That means a ton of wrestlers are getting kicked out of WWE. We're going to break all of that down. Of course, we're going to take a look at the biggest topics and trends in wrestling. Also, a directive about NXT and age requirements. We've got the news and notes on all of that. Doing the show with me, as always, he's the one. He's the only. He is the Doc, John Macroon. What's up, cuz?
Thank goodness we weren't on the sheet that got released. Oh, my gosh. The crazy part of this week, and I think the part that has really upset wrestling fans, is how do you time the decision to release that many wrestlers the same day that you release quarterly income of over $200 million? It makes no sense.
Yep.
And I think that what upsets a lot of people is the fact that you're doing it like in mass, 20 people or so at a time, when you could just sprinkle it in little by little. I know that when you deliver bad news, it's never going to be popular, but I think the impact of just hearing that, okay, the company makes damn near $250 million in a quarter. Okay. These contracts are not adding up to $250 million. I mean, if you added them all together, they're probably $10 million. Mm-hmm. So where's the budget cut coming in? So it just, when I heard the news, I was shocked. I was floored. I'm like, wait a minute. Karrion Kross, Eva Marie, the likes of Keith Lee. What's going on here? Because these were characters that you invested in. And it really speaks to, I think, the factors that upset a lot of wrestling fans is that Vince goes, I don't like this guy. I don't like what I'm seeing, and then I just move on, which is really hard.
The problem with it is a lot of these guys get over in a product like NXT. Like, you have Karrion Kross, you've got Keith Lee, you've got Scarlett Bordeaux, you've got B-Fab, who just got called up to the main roster and just signed a new contract a couple of days, maybe a week and a half ago, only to get released, and their gimmicks are over, but you bring them to the main roster, and then you tweak them, you adjust them. I mean, you had Karrion Kross, who was basically a silent killer on NXT, bring him to the main roster, you slap him in a bootleg hockey helmet, and he's a gimp. Like, he's walking around basically just missing a strap on. It's nuts to watch how when these guys get promoted to the main roster, how their entire character gets flipped and changed. And just to kind of go over some of the cuts, and mind you, there have been over 60 people released this year alone. I mean, back when COVID was hot and heavy, there were a ton of wrestlers released. This year alone, Vince McMahon and WWE have let go of over 60 employees. That is essentially a wrestling organization unto itself. That's crazy. And like you said, when you release earnings for your third quarter and all of your profit margins are going up, it's hard to justify it. But the releases that took place on Thursday, Scarlett Bordeaux, Frankie Monet, Ember Moon, Trey Baxter, Karrion Kross, Oni Lorcan, B-Fab, Jesse Kamea, Zendaya Raymer, Grand Metalik, Lindsay Dorado, Jeet Rama, Katrina Cortez, Nia Jax got released, Keith Lee, Harry Smith, Mia Yim, Eva Marie, who was brought back and then released, and it's what that is. It's nuts. So they're stating that all of these cuts were done for budgetary reasons. Now, there's another report going around that a lot of these cuts were due to vaccination status. What do you make of that? People are getting released from WWE because they're not vaccinated. Nia Jax was probably the biggest name mentioned in that conversation.
That makes it even more tough, too, because you bring into light people's personal choice. And it's tough, too, because when you talk about it, and everybody knows from the Doc and Jock podcast, I was essentially forced, based on the job in sports, to get vaccinated. But I just think that everybody needs to dial it down. Everybody's concerns are valid, but everybody's so sensitive and hypersensitive to their point of view that it's just really a tough conversation to have, one that's nuanced. It's not black or white. For those that aren't, maybe there's allergies, maybe there's concern about fertility, maybe there's concerns about, it's not a bad thing to say that we still don't know the long-term effects. Now, the odds say that we're all going to be okay based on the history, but we also can't discount the fact that there are documentaries out there, there's information out there that these companies, when it was looked at in terms of opioids, have done some shady things in regards to the pursuit of profit. So they both can be true, that the vaccine can be effective for most people and be safe, but also it's a profit-driven situation that sometimes makes people veer off of the altruistic nature of what the vaccine is for. So we're all hypersensitive for it, and I know in a billion-dollar business, there's a lot of factors that I think go into releases. For a lot of them, you could say, okay, are you really going to be upset with Grand Metalik being gone? Nia Jax had a history of being dangerous, and by and large, everybody looks at the immediate, oh my God, she's gone. But she was there for 7 years. That's a nice run to try and get over, try and get yourself in a position. And unfortunately, I think what's more of a factor is, and when you put yourself in a boss mentality, Nia gets hurt a lot. And when you pay somebody potentially a guarantee and they're not there, you just kind of feel like, hey, you're taking my money, and it hurts. So a billion-dollar guy like Vince looks at it and goes, she's missed how much time in her contract? She's had this, plus the fact that she's not vaxxed, plus the fact that she's a unsafe worker. I think they just said, okay, move on, we can find somebody else. And unfortunately, the bigger theme in my mind is the fact that, and it's something that wrestlers now have to grapple with, is Vince does not view individuals as important as needed. He views the brand. We are WWE. It's just a sum of interchangeable parts. We can create characters and move on from them just that quick. And if you're a wrestler, you got to realize that. It's a business. Yeah, the boss is going to love you, invite you to Thanksgiving dinner, but when it comes down to looking at money, he's going to look at the total picture, and you're never safe. In these contracts, you can get whacked at any time. You're an independent contractor. So in the wrestling business, this shit is serious. And at any time, he can say, I don't like this shiny new toy anymore. I'm going to go to this shiny new toy and move forward. And that's the crazy part of the wrestling business, is it's a carnival circus. You're putting your body on the line, and the biggest company in the world is now operating under the notion of, hey, we evaluate things quickly and we move on. And that's just how fast it is. But the good thing is there are other companies that should benefit from some of these releases. It's not the end of the world. Back, remember 2 years ago when we were podcasting, it was like cut day was like the end of your career. Yeah. This is just now a transition where if you have something, you will get a second chance. It's not like somebody that gets cut from the Lions, and their career's over. Oh, wait. Now I meant if someone gets cut from the Patriots and they can move on, someone can move on from WWE, move on to Impact, and be maybe a bigger fish in a little pond, and maybe come back. Drew McIntyre, perfect example. He was cut, and now he's a star. And sometimes people just maybe need a little kick in the ass, and so you just, as long, you and I are not in the boardroom, we're not making the decisions. But I just think 20 releases, and I think some of them, obviously Eva Marie, okay, that's fine. But the likes of the three that I think are pissing people off are Ember Moon, maybe for the lady from Hit Row, Keith Lee, and Karrion Kross. I mean, Karrion Kross was a mainstay on your television show for almost a year, and you can't get that guy over. That guy's a star, and it's just it's not. And I think for those people, I think that's where the anger is driven, is that they feel like the company screwed them as opposed to them screwing the company. But I think they'll land on their feet and they'll be okay.
I think there was a lot of good in what you just said there, whether it be with the your point of view on the vaccination and people and getting vaccinated, all the way up to how the company looks at the wrestlers. Like, there was a lot of truth in what you said, and I think you put it pretty much perfectly. As far as her getting released because of her vaccination status, and anybody else on the roster was getting released because
it didn't help. It didn't help their evaluation.
It doesn't. You have to also realize it is a business. This is a business that travels from town to town, city to city, country to country, and being vaccinated makes you more available. So if you're in a storyline and they're trying to push your storyline and you miss a couple of shows in a row, your storyline kind of falls short, and you can't really move it, and you can't elevate it. So they start to think, well, what the hell are we doing with you? So it makes sense from a business standpoint, where if you're not vaccinated in this business, we're going to cut you. Now, do I think that should play a major part? No, I don't think it should be a major part in why you get released, but I do think it is a contributing factor. Now, there was also another report that came out by Brian Alvarez of Wrestling Observer, and the idea is that WWE is set to assess everyone in developmental, so everybody in NXT 2.0, every 6 months. And if anyone hasn't made enough progress, they're going to be released. I find this to be so fascinating and so interesting because if you're in, like, I don't know about you, I don't really care for NXT 2.0. I haven't enjoyed it. For the most part, I've stopped watching it. I loved NXT. I thought NXT was great. I thought NXT was the best brand that WWE had. NXT 2.0, it's, like you said, it's kind of a carnival atmosphere. I don't watch it. But I find this to be very interesting because if you are in NXT 2.0 and you're kind of putting some stuff together and you're working on a character, you're working on developing something, and, you know, you're like, I just don't think they get it. I don't think they see it. Because some of these guys are pretty smart. You know, a lot of these guys figure out what will get over, but WWE just doesn't like it because it doesn't fit into their cookie cutter mold. I mean, Karrion Kross is a perfect example. He didn't fit. Like, he has the look. He can deliver a great promo. The guy can wrestle, but he didn't fit their mold for what they wanted to do with him. So he gets released. Some of these guys can work on these things, and then you just kind of sandbag it a little bit. You can get cut and end up in AEW. You know, or you end up in Impact. And like you said, sometimes you're a bigger fish in a smaller pond, and it works out better for you. What do you make of people getting cut every 6 months? I think it makes for a tough workplace, too, because that's hanging over your head all day long.
It's bad for morale, but really at this point, the way in which I start to look at it is the WWE too big to fail? I mean, when you get $2 billion deals, you get $25 million just to show up for 3 days. You have merchandise all over the world, licensing deals, shirts that sell out, avenues of content that people want to buy. Unfortunately, you know, the vocal majority of people that podcast or are fans are not happy, but the show goes on. They still ran a Raw. They still ran a SmackDown. Your top-end stars that you've developed are cash cows. And you just look at it from this perspective. If you're not Roman Reigns, if you're not Brock Lesnar, if you're not Big E, you're not the New Day, you're not the top 10 guys that the company really invests in, if you're not Kevin Owens, if you're not Seth Rollins, then I believe that you're on the chopping block. If you're not the top 10 person, if you're not the person in the second hour of a show, then you should always be trying to hustle and trying to get there. And you got to just have in the back of your mind that I'm on the chopping block, on the chopping block, like the NFL. I think the mindset for wrestlers now, and I think it's there, is the fact that, yes, I'm here in WWE, but it's just in name alone. At any time, Vince could say bye, and I'm out. And it's just, it could be a promo that doesn't go right. It could be an angle that Vince saw that he wanted you to do. It could be that he gave me a shitty angle and he wanted to see. You never know. Vince could just be that diabolical. He's like, okay, we're going to give Karrion, this is the test. We're going to give Karrion a shitty angle, and we're going to make him look stupid. Can he get it over? If he gets it over, okay, then we give him the full resource, and because remember, the New Day wasn't the New Day. You remember the first outfits that Big E was wearing and shit like that? You remember the Shield and stuff like that? I mean, yeah, they got it over, but, you know, there are some gimmicks that are bad, but some people get over. And I think sometimes potentially that maybe is the litmus test. Can you get a character over? You know, Paul Levesque was that weird, you know, hoity-toity French
weird
dude. Yeah, exactly.
French British dude, yeah.
Exactly, but he had something. He did something with it. And maybe, you know, the likes of Karrion maybe was a little sad and was mopey or whatever it was that potentially they saw and said, okay, he couldn't get it over. We now know that we have to give him the full force, and we're not going to do that. We're going to save that for Roman Reigns. It could be a lot of factors, and we're speculating, but a lot of it is the big thing is that I think with you just don't feel like the company gave it enough of a chance. I mean, Keith Bearcat Lee was basically handcuffed. They told him to stop doing some high spots. They wanted him to work more of a traditional big man approach, but this guy could do things, and I think that the challenging part is the company's role in limiting the creative development of some of these characters. I mean, Ember Moon, how do you let her go when she was at the top of the show just a couple years ago? So it's unfortunate, but I do want to ask you this. of the characters that you see potentially moving on, who do you think would thrive in Impact and who do you think would thrive at AEW? Because I think that Karrion Kross and Keith Lee just have to go to AEW. They have to get that deal. They can be put in angles right away. The likes of Ember Moon, some of the female wrestlers, I think could go back to Impact Wrestling and get over and then potentially move up to AEW. But I'm definitely excited for the potential of Keith Lee and Karrion Kross moving forward. I think there's some real. I think AEW is just going to build. They're just going to build their company, build their roster, and the surprises that you could have are really going to be something to see. I mean, you don't think Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks can do something with Karrion Kross? I mean, come on. They know who he is. They know what Keith Lee, bro, he's going to be a world champion in AEW.
Keith Lee is, and you're right, the biggest miss here was probably Keith Lee.
Absolutely.
Because he was a guy who, he wasn't your traditional big man, and that's what made him special. Like, this is a guy who did some of the weird flippy stuff that guys like Gran Metalik and Lince Dorado did. And he's like almost 300 pounds, maybe 300 pounds plus. And like, he had an interesting look. The guy was going toe to toe with Brock Lesnar, and it was believable. You know, that's hard to find. And yet you still missed on that guy. How does that happen? Like, if I'm WWE, I'm looking at myself like, how does this happen? How do we screw this one up? But I think you're right. A guy like Karrion Kross, Scarlett Bordeaux, they're a package deal. They're husband and wife, or the boyfriend, girlfriend. I'm not sure what their actual status is, but they're together. They're a package deal. I think they go to AEW. I think they make an immediate impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keith Lee's the same way.
Dude, you could just relive the WWE feuds, but done right. Just have him go up against Malachi Black. I mean, come on. It's great. It's exciting times. Bad news for the wrestling world, but I think, you know, when one door closes, the other door's got to open. And I think the blessing is that there's other companies out there that will have the opportunity to shine the light on wrestlers, and we'll see how it goes. But I
think somebody else, too, just to put this out there real quick, I think somebody else, Mia Yim. Mia Yim was great when she was in Impact. And she was pretty good in NXT. I don't think she ever really got to develop herself the way she needed to. She's fantastic in the ring. I think she'd be great in AEW. I think the biggest surprise with all these cuts, too, was a guy like Harry Smith. Harry Smith was Baby Boy Smith's son, and he basically showed up for a show, and then they let him go. Like, it was really weird.
Are you surprised? Are you surprised that a character named TBar didn't last? I mean, especially the matches that he had in NXT were good, and then he comes up to the main roster as T-Bar, and everybody's making fun of him, calling him Teabag, and looking at the mask. That was a big dude that you could have highlighted, and again, they didn't get that gimmick over, so I just don't see it. I just think that it's too hard, too, to get those gimmicks over. We just say it flippantly, but it's unbelievably hard because fans are fickle. Who's gonna respect somebody that's named T-Bar? I mean, it was inherently, you're going into it, all the podcasts are laughing, everybody's like, this character sucks, you're in bad matches, you're not, you have your angle pulled, right? I mean, literally, it's like, okay, we had an angle, and then it's just gone. And then we knew it, we called it, we said, oh, looks like Retribution's done, and that's it. So it was unfortunate and all the way around. All right, let's get into this week's shows. I do want to say this, even though we have complained about Raw, 2 weeks in now, their storytelling has started to pick up. I was very impressed to see Kevin Owens back in the main event picture. Maybe a last-ditch effort to keep him around if, rumors are true regarding his future. I thought that that match was great. The angle setup was amazing. But for me, I thought the highlight was Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair opening up the show with a quality match. I thought it was a good Raw all the way through. I'm just curious to see what you thought about it, and maybe potentially do you see Kevin Owens sticking around if there's the carrot dangled that maybe he's going to be a heel or potentially be featured back in the main event scene? Because we haven't seen him in the main event scene for a long time, but it was like he never left.
Yeah, like you said, 2 really good Raw episodes back to back. It's nice to see them starting to maybe build something here as far as the show goes. I don't anticipate it lasting because it's what WWE does. I did think it was quite funny on SmackDown. Roman Reigns basically called out Monday Night Raw. I thought that was quite entertaining. But you're right, 2 really good shows, and I think the highlight of it was the Becky Bianca match. And I'll get to Kevin Owens in a minute because there's a lot going on with Kevin Owens right now. Tons of rumors with him. But I think the Becky Bianca match was absolutely fantastic. I think what you did here was you were able to get Bianca over as a legitimate badass, and you have Becky keeping her title. So it's a win-win for you, because at some point Becky's going to drop the title to Bianca. It just makes sense. But I think the best thing to come out of this match, and it was something subtle, and it was something that you got to see with Bianca. It was some growth from her as a competitor. There were points in this match where she was trying to get the win and trying to get the pin, and she was devastating Becky with power move after power move, just beating the living tar out of Becky. And this match probably could have went another 15 minutes to really sell a lot of what was taking place. But there was a point where where Bianca goes to climb up on the rope, and you could just see the frustration in her face. So now she's starting to convey this message. And like I said, you're getting this growth from her where it's not just her physical body. It's now her facial expressions that are helping to tell the story. As she's climbing the rope to go do this move off the top, you could just see in her face, she's like, what else do I have to do to put her away? What else do I have to hit her with to win this belt back? Like, I'm throwing everything at her. And I thought that was probably the most poignant moment of the match, was just Bianca's facial expressions just kind of helping to move this storyline along. And look, we all know Becky Lynch is absolutely fantastic in the ring. Bianca is absolutely fantastic in the ring. These guys could put on a clinic all day long. So I thought it was a really great match, and I thought it was highlighted with some growth from Bianca just in her wrestling ability and her ability to convey a story. I thought this match, like I said, could probably have went maybe another 15 minutes to really help sell some of the devastation that Becky was taking. I mean, when you're getting power bombed and you're getting suplexed all over the place, and then you're kind of popping back up only after a few seconds, you're not really selling what is actually taking place. But otherwise, I thought it was a great match to help kick off a solid Monday Night Raw. Now, as far as Kevin Owens goes, I don't think Kevin Owens needs to turn heel. And I think this is what WWE does. I think this is how they view him. They view him as a heel. So at some point, I do see him turning heel. I don't think they need to do it, though. I think Kevin Owens is as gone can be. His contract expires in January. I think Kevin Owens jumps over to AEW, and I think it only makes sense. I think he can go over there. Look, him and Chris Jericho had one of the best gimmicks, 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe, with the whole list in the celebration of friendship. So he's got an in over at AEW. Could you imagine him doing some of the stuff he used to do when he was in ROH in AEW? Could you imagine them, just him and Jericho kind of squaring up and just kind of going verbal warfare with each other and basically pulling on the Festival of Friendship? Like, I think it would be amazing. I think there's so much Kevin Owens could do in AEW that WWE just kind of limits him. I think at some point Kevin Owens does leave WWE, and I think it's better for everybody. I think it's better for all of us. I mean, could you imagine him in AEW? How fantastic would it be?
Oh my gosh, the angles, the fact that you could see him as a world champion. I think the good thing about AEW is the belt right now, the way in which it's been used and put on Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley, I think that it's already developed a prestige that winning it is a big deal. Yes. So I think that that's all you can establish with a company, is that your title means something, that it's not just a nilly-dilly passed along from wrestler to wrestler. The wrestlers that get it are made, and the wrestlers that earn it, it means that we really believe in you, and that's all you can do as a company. And Kevin Owens, if he were to don that belt, it would look good, and it would be believable. So I can't wait to see. And for him, it's just great, because now this is what having two companies will do, is that Kevin now can say, look, I want a little bit of a say in my character. I want a little bit of a say in this. Guarantee me a couple runs with this, a couple runs with that, and a bigger, hefty guarantee, a little bit less time on the road, and and he can now ask for it. And let's see if WWE commits to it, because if they do, then great. It's going to be great for Kevin, no doubt. But if he goes to AEW, then it's going to be really great, because he's going to have a reduced work schedule and a lot of money and a lot of exposure with a company that will also enhance his talent as a professional wrestler.
And I think it'd be great for wrestling fans just in general, because if he does go to AEW, he gets that say in his character. He gets to do what he wants to do, and he gets to tell the story that he wants to tell. And I think that's what interests all of us.
Yes. What'd you make of Smackdown? Because I think that you and I basically, in our talk before the show, kind of had the same vibe. It was like, man, coming off of the releases, maybe there was a little bit of a hangover. The show just kind of fell flat. It just kind of had maybe one match but a lot of lulls. It just kind of felt like a show where people were putting it together, but it just didn't hit where it needed to, in my mind.
So as I'm watching SmackDown just kind of unfold, I keep looking at my phone, keep looking at my watch, and I'm like, how much longer is this episode going to be? And that's how I know when I'm really checked out on an episode of wrestling, is when I'm like, I can't wait for this to get over, because I just wanted to get to Rampage. I wanted to watch Rampage. I wanted to take in whatever they were going to provide me with. I thought SmackDown was, whether it was a release hangover, whether it was just bad storytelling, whether it was what they were giving us, I thought the only thing that was redeeming about it was you had this match between Kofi and Jey Uso, and I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was great. I find Roman Reigns and I find his storyline to be the most interesting thing going. I do feel like it kind of gets crammed down our throat a little bit too much. I find Paul Heyman to be arguably the best part of that whole entire bit. So it's interesting to watch when all four of those guys, when the Usos, Heyman, and Roman Reigns are on screen. It's great to watch that, but they can't do that for 2 hours. Like, you've got to find something else. I thought the whole thing with the New Day and Kofi and Xavier was great. In the match between, I said it was Kofi earlier. It was actually Xavier, King Xavier versus Jey Uso, and I thought it was a great match, and I thought the way it ended was fitting. I mean, it was, you have to bend your knee to the king, and Xavier gets the win, and Roman Reigns from behind Superman punches Xavier, and then they just basically tear the New Day apart. So you're going to have a story here. You're going to build to something. At the same point, Jay hasn't been able to get his shit together. Like, he hasn't been able to live up to the standards that Roman wants. And at some point, I think that's going to come to a head. As I'm watching this unfold, mind you, I force my girlfriend to watch these shows with me. She actually enjoys them, but she tells me I force her to watch them sometimes. And she's like, he still can't do what he wants him to do. And like, she hasn't watched a couple of episodes in a while, but it's just that long-term story that, hey, the Uso brothers keep kind of falling short of what Roman's expectations are. So at some point, you know something's going to happen. It's just, when does that happen? But otherwise, I just thought SmackDown was blah. I didn't enjoy it. I mean, best match, do you not agree? Xavier versus Jay?
Xavier versus Jay, I thought, was quality, best part of the show. It's good to see the New Day kind of continuing to branch off collectively. Kofi had his run, Big E has his right now, and King Xavier has now a personality that can enhance his situation. So I think that they put in the time, and they deserve to have quality matches. It's just, the bloodline is running. You got to just now, the goal for SmackDown is to develop the next crew that's going to take on the bloodline. I mean, Brock Lesnar's going to be there, but who's next? Who's going to be there to take on Roman Reigns, because he's gone through everybody? Who's going to get the nod to get over? And we'll watch that moving forward. AEW this week, I thought, was okay in terms of the shows that they put on. I think, for me, Rampage, with the hour that they delivered with CM Punk and Eddie Kingston, might have won the week in terms of their show. But
can we talk about that? Can we talk about that promo real quick?
It was Eddie Kingston was pissed. It was cool.
Eddie Kingston cuts one of the best promos you've ever heard in your entire life. And he has no problem calling you out, calling himself out, calling out everybody in the back. If there's any truth in that promo that he cut, because I don't know if it was real or not, there's a whole lot to unpack there. Whether it be CM Punk basically showing up Eddie Kingston when he was younger, and guys in the room showing up Eddie Kingston when he was younger, Eddie Kingston basically damn near losing his house and fighting to get to AEW, or Eddie Kingston basically saying, nobody in the back wants you here. Get your shit and get out and be gone like you were for 7 years. Like, there was a lot in that promo. Eddie Kingston just delivered hardcore. And there were points where you're watching the physical reaction. This is the great thing, I think, of that in just kind of you and I, things that we kind of pick up on. And I think a lot of it has to do with you and your professional field as a psychologist. And I think it's just me from just observing human nature. If you watch the physical reaction of people sometimes, it tells you everything you need to know. And if you watched CM Punk's body language as this promo was unfolding. That's why it leads me to believe there's some truth here, because some of what Eddie Kingston was saying, it seemed like it hit hard for CM Punk. And he did a good job to keep that smirk on his face. But I thought he cut deep on CM Punk with some of the stuff he said. I thought it was fantastic. I thought that was one of the absolute best highlights of the night. I thought it was great.
Yeah, for me, it was great delivered. I just don't like the whole "you're better than me" angle. I just, the "you held me down" angle has been tapped into pretty good. I was an indie, I went to you, and you held your thumb. But you both are standing in an AEW ring. You know what I mean? So for me, I would have maybe tried to find a little bit more of a creative angle, maybe in terms of the fact that, trying to think here on the fly, what could have pissed somebody off is if maybe CM Punk back talked to him or said something to got friends with the booker, or maybe, he just said something incorrectly, like, you went to, potentially I had a chance to make money. I had a chance to go to the big show, and I know that you told the old man that I wasn't worth it. Something like that would have been juicy. You know what I mean? You could have referenced Vince in a corny way, but would have been a little bit more than the whole, the boys just held me down. But I mean, dude, Eddie Kingston's legit. Unfortunately, here's the problem, though. The physicality kind of looked...
that was wonky.
That was wonky.
That was kind of unneeded. You didn't need that.
Yeah, you didn't see, because what they're doing is when they do that and they stand toe to toe. I think now besides the roll up, the next thing on my don't do list is when the guys grab each other's heads and then punch each other, because it looks stupid. It just doesn't look right. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It should be, if you guys remember the way in which The Rock would do it, it would be a punch, stop, then the other guy would punch. You got to do that. Grabbing each other's head and then just like swinging like a roundabout looks like wrestling's fake. It doesn't work right. So what you do is you say, okay, don't do that. Is you say, okay, Eddie, you throw the first punch, then CM Punk throws a kick, and then you just like punch. That way the crowd can get into it, and then you wrestle around. It just felt like a fake kind of little brawl there. So you got to tighten that up a little bit. The shots weren't like cut away like the WWE does precisely to get away from it. But like I said, AEW has done a stellar job overall. I can't wait to see the development now of the pay-per-view, and we'll break it all down next week as the pay-per-view comes close, a full gear, I believe, on Saturday. Mm-hmm. So it'll be a fun time for AEW. All right, Cuz, hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What caught your attention this week?
So a lot to unpack. So last week, Jim Ross, the lead announcer for All Elite Wrestling, announced that he's been diagnosed with skin cancer. In a post on Twitter, Ross said that he was waiting on his radiologist to study the cancer to determine the best treatment. Ross has undergone a CT scan after dealing with the skin problem for more than a year now. The WWE Hall of Famer has numerous health issues. He has multiple bouts with Bell's palsy. That's part of the reason why part of his face is kind of slumped, and he talks with that little bit of a slurred speech. That dates back to his first stint in WWE in 1994. Ross previously had surgery in 2005 to have part of his colon removed after a cancer scare. Now, recently on his Grilling JR podcast that dropped this week, Ross stated that he doesn't plan on missing any work due to the treatments. He explained that he's going to have 22 radiation treatments over the course of roughly 3 weeks to help minimize the skin cancer that he's dealing with. Now, seems like Bray Wyatt has ruffled some feathers in WWE right before he left. Fightful Select reported that WWE sources felt Vince McMahon didn't like Wyatt towards the end of his tenure with the company. Those sources, it sounds like it's Bruce Pritchard, and it sounds like it's some people in creative, with Wyatt being very vocal about his issues with creative, believed to be the reason why that Vince didn't like him. The report also noted that Wyatt, Randy Orton, and others involved were not happy with the creative direction or the finish of the WrestleMania 37 match, which was reportedly changed days before the show. It was also noted that some talent reached out to Orton and Wyatt to say that they felt bad about their bout being changed. Fightful stated that they were previously told that there was never a true creative endgame for that entire story. Wyatt was also frustrated with the Burning the Fiend angle, in which Wyatt returned charred following the Randy Orton setting him on fire at Tables, Ladders, and Chairs in 2020. The creative team was told that Wyatt thought that the suit was too heavy. He was going to look bad, so it was scrapped, per the report. It also stated that Wyatt has not confirmed this, however. Now, there was another report that came out earlier this week, and they wanted to bring to life the Firefly Funhouse. But Bray would only do it if he could act out all of the characters. And they had some mock-ups and some designs of what some of those characters look like. And when I tell you they were absolutely terrifying, it was unreal. Like, it would have been the scariest, awesomest thing you've ever seen. But he had to be in charge of the creative. And of course, Vince isn't going to give you that. It would have been, honestly, it would have been badass if he could have brought it to life. It would have been so sweet. But WWE basically squashed that. Now, some sad news. Tony Khan on Tuesday night tweeted that Jon Moxley has entered into an inpatient alcohol rehabilitation center. If you've watched any of Moxley's promos over the last, say, month and a half, it does seem like he's almost liquored up when he's doing them.
Yeah.
It's everything he's talking about is getting drunk as well. It's been really kind of strange, and there's been like this weird kind of pivot. And I would say, would you agree? Maybe 6, maybe 8 weeks. It's kind of been this.
Yeah, and for me, I didn't bring it up, but the marker is, and he's kind of always looks this way, but he has that like red-cheeked face, kind of looks like when he blows up and things like that, and you kind of get that vibe like something's wrong. He's down, like the after effects of trying to pull yourself up. And for me, you try to rationalize in your brain like, okay, it's the road. Something looked off. He didn't have the same kind of look. You say, okay, something wrong. I didn't know it would be full-blown relapse of his situation to the point where he needs to be in the hospital. That's severe to the point where you don't feel like you're in control. So kudos to him to get it nipped in the bud, take as much time as you need, and get back strong. It's a tough life, man. The life of a wrestler is not easy. It's like you get up, you work, you train, you hang in at the facility, you do your thing, and then the part that's, I think, psychologically tough is that you're playing a character, and sometimes that can bleed into your real life. Like, that dude is not the Wild Thing. I think that, he's Jon Moxley. He's going to be someone's parent. He's got to be able to really compartmentalize the fact that this is entertainment. You're playing a character, and the character is supposed to do this. But then when you leave, you got to shut that off and get back to the person that you are, which is not easy to do, but that's the way in which you sustain a long career, is to really in your mind say, this is work, this is the character, this is television. But then when I go home, I'm Renee's husband, I'm this dude's dad, and I'm just one of the boys, and get back to being a fan of the sport, get back to other type stuff. So, but it's tough, man. It's tough to battle addiction because the devil's always on your shoulder saying, do it. And then you got pain. You got the sometimes the mind that doesn't shut off, issues, and just pain. The dude's got to be in pain because the dude likes to do shit, crazy shit in the ring.
Absolutely. I mean, some of his stuff that he does and some of the stunts that he performs are absolutely bonkers. Like, hey, let's have a barbed wire match just to have a barbed wire match. Like, it's not needed. You don't have to do that. But it's part of his gimmick. It's part of who he is, and it's part of what he tries to get over. So I get it, and it works. But sometimes, like you said, you don't always have to do that. Finally, one last little tidbit here, and I'm interested to get your take on this. So with the revamp of NXT 2.0 comes a new philosophy to attract a younger male audience. And you may have seen, quote unquote, hot women appearing all throughout the show lately. Well, according to the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter, the new recommendation within WWE is to sign women who are 25 or younger because supposedly that'll attract more young male viewers. Obviously, there can be and probably will be some exceptions for some really elite talent that might become free and might have to go to NXT before they make it to the main roster. Now, for clarity, the exact words that the Observer reported were, age is also likely a part of many of the decisions because the company is well aware that they don't have enough talent in their 20s on television and are looking at recruiting bigger, younger, and people with more of a legitimate athletic background going forward. The new directive on hiring new women in the recommendations are 25 or younger for their age. So sounds a little bit like ageism, but I guess I kind of get it. But at the same point, and you know this as well as I know this, MILF porn is the hottest selling porn there is. So if you're looking to attract younger viewers, I mean, you don't need to get moms out there, but there's nothing wrong with being in your 30s, being 35, and still being able to get the job done. You watched Impact a couple weeks ago. You watched Impact this week. Mickie James is the new champion, and she still kind of gets it done, and she's, I think, in her 40s.
Oh, boy. Ratings, baby. The ratings ploy. It's always the case. Oh, good stuff, man. And WWE, always old faithful in regards to the women. I hope it doesn't derail the women's revolution because they've done a good job over the past 5 years.
It's just, dude, it's weird to me to see how WWE does things. Like, I don't think any other wrestling organization does things like WWE does. You know, like letting go of 60 qualified wrestlers, then basically putting restrictions on who you can hire because they're too old. Like, it's just weird. Like, if you ever heard AEW doing that, I feel like there'd be backlash everywhere. But WWE does it, and we're just like, yeah, it's WWE. Vince is crazy. And we just move on. It's nuts. But that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and notes, brother.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Any place that you listen and enjoy to your favorite podcast, make sure you type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and then you can hit the subscribe button, and you can find our daily content breaking down all things in the world of Detroit sports, whether it be the Lions, Pistons, wrestling, the Detroit Tigers, and their crazy moves to start the offseason. All things Detroit sports we break down and we take a look at. It's a great opportunity to stay in the loop in the world of Detroit sports. And make sure you stay tuned to every weekend to the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. Talk soon, cuz.